Hello, my name is Sarah Jackson, and I am working towards becoming a special education teacher of learners with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, and incorporating applied behavior analysis, or ABA, strategies in the classroom. Although this isn't a common classroom structure, I will continue to advocate for it in hopes that I can create an exceptional learning environment to meet the individual needs of my students. In the following presentation, I will be delivering my vision statement as it applies to being a culturally inclusive educator as an ABA ASD classroom teacher. Types of learners and hidden curriculum. As a future teacher in the special education community, I expect my classroom to have a diverse demographic. Considering that I already work as an ABA therapist in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I see clients from diverse cultures and backgrounds. However, according to Applied Behavior Analysis EDU, between 4 and 5 times as many boys as girls are diagnosed with ASD each year. Children with ASD can also have specific interests that make their motivation extremely unique to them. For example, a student may love trains and have an extensive knowledge base about trains. This would make engaging with other classroom materials less motivating. So in order to keep the student engaged, I could provide them with train stickers, toys, or worksheets that include trains. When working with learners with ASD, it's not about finding something that is usually reinforcing to children, but something that's specifically reinforcing to each student to engage them in the classroom. As discussed in Hidden Curriculum lecture in Lesson 2, hidden curriculum is considered the unwritten, unofficial, and unintended lessons, values, and perspectives that students learn in school, and is based off of the recognition that students absorb lessons in school that may or may not be a part of the formal course study. For example, how they interact with peers, teachers, and other adults, how they should perceive different races, groups, or classes of people, or what ideas and behaviors are considered acceptable or unacceptable. In an ABA-ASD classroom, students will learn more than just their numbers, colors, alphabet, etc., but they're learning functional communication and daily living skills as well. So they will absorb ways to socially interact with their peers and adults based off of the culture that I create in the classroom, which is why it's so important that the hidden curriculum is functional, non-biased, and inclusive of all cultures. Learning environment and the concepts of space, place, and material culture. In a conducive learning environment for students with ASD, there are accommodations to be considered. I want to design a learning environment that offers sensory accommodations, peer interaction, and opportunities for students to work one-on-one with classroom educators. As Statment explains, a most important quality of children's interaction with the environment involves the finding and making of places for themselves. Students in my classroom will need specific environments that will provide an opportunity for them to find a place for themselves, such as a quiet corner that can provide relief from an overstimulated environment if a student often gets overstimulated in the classroom with their peers. In the Culture in Schools, Place, and Space lecture, we learned that space tells the user something about the beliefs of the school or the learning environment. In my classroom, I envision the environment I create to be a positive learning environment that prioritizes students' needs. For example, including an active mat or like one of those foam mats in the center of the room for the children to like play on and let out energy. With learning spaces or desks and tables along the edges of the classroom, I'm creating an environment reflecting the idea that they're children first. Our learning environment implements learning opportunities naturally instead of forcing students in their seats all day with only table work. That's really unrealistic for that demographic, I think. I aim to have an inclusive, patient, and understanding learning environment where our staff is dedicated to student success by always putting their needs as children first. In the Culture in Schools Material Culture lecture, we learned that material culture is considered the objects and artifacts that make up our teaching and learning experiences. In my future classroom, this will include positive and soft colored decor in the classroom. The materials on the walls will be a combination of routines for the students to follow, such as arrival routine, so like take off backpack, take off coat, change into indoor shoes, and dismissal routine, etc. So just any routines that are extremely important to the classroom at the time. And positive messages like you are loved and be you. I'll also include materials that can exercise fine and gross motor skills like Play-Doh activities, sorting objects, activities on the active mat, or they're doing jumping jacks and things like that. I want the classroom material to be more naturalistic learning instead of worksheets and table work. The achievement gap and cultural bias. In the achievement gap lecture, the achievement gap is described as the disparity of achievement between various student groups, which exists especially between groups that differ in socioeconomic status, race and ethnicity, and gender. When we're discussing the special education sector, students have the potential to slip through the cracks even more if public education does not offer them an equal opportunity to succeed as their neurotypical peers receive. The most controllable aspects to decreasing the achievement gaps for students with ASD in public education is challenging our current perspective and practices by maintaining higher expectations of student success, applying an appropriate yet rigorous curriculum, and building relationships with other stakeholders. Students in an ASD classroom can come from any cultural background, so it's equally as important for an ASD classroom to be culturally inclusive as it is for general education. So for example, reading multicultural literature is just as important in an ASD classroom as it is in a general education classroom. A culturally inclusive classroom not only benefits the students, but creates a welcoming environment for the families as well. This encourages a healthy and collaborative relationship between the teacher and their students' families. Culture as a disability and interpreting cultural conflict in learning environments. As an ABA-ASD teacher, the inclusion of culture in the classroom is building unique learning plans for each student's abilities and creating a classroom culture built around my students. It's my responsibility to exclude approaches such as the deprivation and differences approach. According to our course, Culture as a Disability lecture, the deprivation approach is the idea that people fail because they don't have the right kind of culture. An example of this in my classroom would be ensuring that students with ASD receive the most opportunities possible to succeed through individualized instruction, despite their differences in learning. The lecture also defines the differences approach as a perspective that people don't succeed because they don't have the right kind of culture, and it isn't wrong, they just know or work in different ways, and those ways aren't something society values as much. I will eliminate this perspective in my classroom by teaching my students in a way that aligns with their learning styles and conduct assessments that are not culturally biased. In our cultural conflicts lecture, we learned that cultural conflict is considered a type of conflict that occurs when different cultural norms clash. In my classroom, this will primarily be striking a balance between teaching my students functional skills that are not culturally specific. An example of this is to teach students to demand, which is another word to request, for something that they want or need in a functional, non-specific cultural way, such as teaching them read book when they want to read a book instead of book please, because not every culture considers saying book or considers saying please to be necessary learning. Another way to create a culturally inclusive classroom is to represent different cultural celebrations throughout the year. This way I'm ensuring that as many cultures are represented in my classroom as possible, instead of only including local culture. Pop culture and core rituals. I do believe that utilizing pop culture and learning opportunities would help keep students motivated in the classroom. As a future ABA-ASD teacher, classroom teacher, including pop culture in the classroom looks different than it would for other classes or age groups. For example, Baby Shark is pop culture for many children I work with. Baby Shark songs can be sung during snack time or can be a part of classroom decoration to make students feel more comfortable in the classroom. I could use Baby Shark cutouts to teach students to count or identify colors. If a student of mine learns to count more effectively when counting shark icons instead of blocks, I'd rather use that motivation than subject my students to the learning style that I'm more familiar with. In an ASD classroom, routines are extremely important. I agree with Greenberg's article from our course readings when she says, "Life with little children is easier when it's filled with simple routines." However, it's important to examine rituals that take place in the classroom as well, especially rituals that are unintentional. For example, how and when are students interacting with one another? So, like, are they always prompted, or are students interacting with each other naturally? Because they can become prompt dependent on us telling them to interact with each other and say hi instead of just doing it on their own. How and when are they interacting with adults? So, are their interactions with adults paired with a consequence, doing something or a negative consequence, or are they interacting with adults in both positive and negative situations? If unintended rituals were transpiring, I could risk altering a student's communication style and how they interact with the world around them. Because our classroom is going to be filled with functional communication skills that are applicable outside of the classroom, it's important that they learn functional skills and not skills that are only paired with the classroom. That could negatively impact their ability to have functional communication skills and work towards being an independent individual. Culturally responsive teaching. As the course Culturally Responsive Teaching lecture states, culturally responsive teaching helps to build bridges between students' cultures and teaching and learning. In the role of an ABA-ASD teacher, this will include building relationships with students and their families, including students' cultures in the classroom, curriculum, and materials, along with refraining from using any culturally biased assessments. So, culturally biased assessment in an ABA environment would be showing an array of pictures, and there's a dog, and you tell them to find the dog. But let's say at home they say puppy, and you say find the dog, and they don't know what you're saying. Or find the puppy, and they always say dog. They don't know what you're asking them to look for because there's a cultural difference in the name of the animal that you ask them to find. Even though they both mean the same thing, it's two different words, and their listener response isn't going to it's not going to be able to detect like the word that you're asking them and associate it with a picture. So our students' success hinges on our ability to be non-biased and present culturally responsive education for all students. By implementing these strategies in my ABA-ASD classroom, I believe that I can maximize student success by minimizing the opportunity for cultural bias. So here are my references. I hope you enjoyed my vision statement as it relates to my future career as an ABA-ASD classroom teacher. This is a topic that I'm deeply passionate about, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to share it with you. Thank you for watching.